Dallas is the rain
All
man
right,
of
now
MMA.
talking hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. Zane Simon is in full form today. That effing idiot, Zane Simon, a half an hour late for the show because some la la la. But anyway, we're here for the UFC 182 Vivisection. John Jones, Daniel Cormier, bigger fight than anything we have seen in ages, and it looks like it's actually happening Saturday night. So cross your fingers, everybody. We might get a great fight. This is John Jones, essentially undefeated. His one loss to Matt Hamill was a disqualification. Daniel Cormier has never even lost a round, has been killing people at heavyweight, moving down to fight for the light heavyweight title. This is a mega fight. It's not so much a mega card, but we're going to go through the whole card in depth. Dallas Winston, Zane Simon, they've both assured me they've been doing hours and hours and hours of research on top of their pre-existing expertise, so be excited for this show. We've got 0 live viewers right now, perhaps because we were late, but I'm not going to belabor that point anymore, Zane Simon. Happy New Year, everybody. How are you guys doing? Dallas, you go first. Happy New Year. How are you?
Hello. Happy New Year.
Is that some kind of, like, cowabunga yoga thing? What is it, the namashti that the yoga people say?
That's my old karate pose, bro.
That's okay. So there you go. Zane?
Dallas Winston already living in the past, one day in 2015.
And he's looking backwards.
Uncle
So
Rico, bitches.
Zane's dressed as Baby New Year. You can't tell, but he's wearing diapers and wings, so it's...
Hey, you know what? It's Thursday. I'm not deviating from my norm. So
Flashes a little depends.
I took off my PJ pants and put on sweatpants for no good reason. So let's... Oh, and I need to plug my shirt.
Was that your big change of the year?
No, that was my big change of the day. I mean,
Roots of fight. Nice.
Yeah, Roots of Fight. Crooklyn got that for me. So, but anyway, let's move on. Any thoughts on the main event quick thoughts before we get into the in-depth details? Dallas, we got 7 viewers now. That was quick. Dallas, what do you think? Main event, epic?
Yeah. I have to say that the epic promo, the off-air, interview or interplay between Jones and I mean, there could not have been a better piece of media to make this fight epic. So that
it really sells it as
feel.
John Jones. We've finally come to terms with John Jones's fake. That's what John Jones is. He's fake, and it's awesome. Like, what a great persona for a champion fighter. He's a completely evil dickhead. It's like Ric Flair come to life as a cage fighter. Like, the way he could go from, thanks for having me on the show, you guys are great, I'm a very professional person, to, Cormier, I'm going to fucking kill you, you blah, 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 and then just zoom. And they captured it perfect. So, very excited. Zane, your thoughts on the main event?
Oh, I think it's one of the best things of the year. I mean, I think it's one of the few truly entirely positive things of 2014 in MMA. It's one of the few things that, that nothing taints that for me. Like, there's no...
The fines and sanctions from the Nevada State Athletic Commission have no...
No, I don't give a shit.
Brawl at a press conference? What about the integrity of the sport?
Well, the brawl at the press conference, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, all of that is so good. Like, nothing when I think about this is bad. I don't think about it and I think, oh, I wish that hadn't happened, though. Like, no, it's all perfect, and it's building up to one fight that deep down in my soul, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. And that's really hard to say for a guy in John Jones' position who, is easily has the most impressive active resume in the sport right now.
Yeah, I mean, he has cleaned out the light heavyweight division for all intents and purposes, and it was a heck of a light heavyweight division before he came there. I mean, there had been a wave of champs, and they'd been passing that belt around amongst themselves for several years, and he just swept them. Like, you're gone, you're irrelevant, I'm the champ, I'm the new thing. But let's get into the card itself. It's a bit of a bring down to go from Jones and Cormier to talking about women's bantamweights, UFC Fight Pass, Alex Dufresne, and Marion Renault. Who wants this one first? And we make it quick.
Just to like somebody. Quickness.
Zane, it's all yours.
Okay. Renault is 37-year-old jiu-jitsu, I believe black belt. Maybe she's a brown belt. No, jiu-jitsu brown belt. But competing at a world-class level, like IBJJF winner at that level. And Dufresne is very athletically gifted, but appears to not be taking training all that seriously, and is really sloppy and I don't know, unpracticed. So
Do you say that because she missed weight last time?
I say that because she missed weight and because of the way she fights, and she's missed weight in like half her pro fights so far.
Not a good sign.
I thought that maybe getting into the UFC would like really put her camp together and tighten it up and all that, but she looked, if anything, less prepared for a step up in competition.
Is she
last
training
time.
with Dave Pee Wee Herman or something?
Yeah, it's kind of how it feels. So, I mean, it's a really tough fight to pick because Renault, other than her jiu-jitsu, is not really technical anywhere. She's aggressive on her feet, but it's not like she's, an amazing fighter anywhere other than with her BJJ. So, I don't know. I mean, I kind of have to pick Dufresne just because I think she has the athletic potential to win at a high level, but it's very much a toss-up.
And Dallas, do you have thoughts? And guys, nobody's congratulating me for not calling her Dufresne like I did on the Care Don't Care preview. I went out and learned how to say it, Dufresne. All right, go ahead, Dallas.
You went out. Where did you go out?
Eugene called me on it on the show.
I actually like Dufresne here. I don't remember it very clearly, but I thought she beat Sarah Moras in her debut. And it's pretty much two jiu-jitsu centric females, and I think Dufresne is just a little more agile, a little more comfortable. She's pretty long and tall for the weight class. I don't know what the height difference is, but she's fairly tall. I want to say 5'9", 5'10". And she's aggressive.
At 5'9", yeah.
And I don't think striking is going to decide this one at all or even play in. And Dufresne, her height works well. She just wants to come forward, clinch up, and she's got a pretty crafty set of like trips and throws. So between, two fairly similar and I guess fairly accredited or similarly accredited jiu-jitsu players, I think Dufresne's a little more aggressive, a little more athletic. I like her height, and I think that she's just got the little things that are going to make the difference on the jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu battle.
All right, and let's see what the odds makers have to say. They like them some Dufresne, not by a huge margin, though. They've got her favored anywhere from -167 all the way up to -205. Renault is the underdog, pretty much all the same, +145 to +167, pretty narrow band. And again, we're getting our odds from Best Fight Odds for those of you who indulge in the venal sin of gambling, which I hope your New Year's resolution is to abandon. I know that's my New Year's resolution after I get these bets in. All right, so the next fight on the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card is welterweights Omari Akhmedov and Mats Nilsson. We've got a Dagestani against a Swede. Is that EU healthcare socialized medicine going to make this guy too soft to compete with the tough, rugged, mean Dagestani? Who wants this one first?
I will, as long as I don't have to decipher that question and answer it.
I was just making ethnic stereotype generalizations. Go ahead. Socialized medicine, it's bad, Dallas. You give people health care, they get spoiled and lazy.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Go ahead. Talk about the fights. Fisticuffs, come on.
Face punch. I don't really have a super strong feeling on this one. I am leaning Akhmedov. I believe both a sport and combat sambo champ. I'm not quite sure. He got his bell rung. Was that Perpetuo? So he's 1-1. He lost. He's 1-1 in the fight that he won in the first round by knockout. He got dropped, and I couldn't tell whether it was by a headbutt or a punch. I think there was some speculation by the broadcast team on that too. Nielsen's solid jiu-jitsu and judo guy. I think actually started out in judo, and he actually did pretty good against Luke Barnett. Mostly just from his heart and determination. I mean, he was coming forward and putting the pressure on, but I mean, just gradually Barnett started to find his rhythm and pick him apart. I don't think Nielsen's got the power or technique to cause a lot of problems for Akhmedov on the feet. And Akhmedov's not proven here, but I would guess a guy with his, three-dimensional. He's striking, he's got good clinch and takedowns and pretty good grappling. But again, Nielsen's pretty solid on the ground. We haven't really got to see a lot of Nielsen because he was just trying to take down a gangly beanpole and Luke Barnett and could not. So to me, he's still kind of I don't know, a question mark, or I don't think we've seen the best of him. So I'm leaning Akhmedov here. But
All right, and Zane, your thoughts on this one?
I don't know. I feel bad because I've been kind of on the Omari Akhmedov anti-hype train for a while because he's been quickly lumped in as like, oh, one of these great Dagestani fighters that we should all watch out for. And people see Dagestan and they're like, oh yeah, Omari Akhmedov is gonna, he's a real legit top tier guy. And now I kind of feel bad about that because he did an interview not long ago over in Russia where he laid it out pretty much on the line and said, look, I am not very good right now and I have a lot of work to do and I have had to really avoid hard the way the UFC's wanted to match me up. I had no, I had no business being in that fight with Gunnar Nelson, and I've got a lot of work to do to get to a good point. And so, he's very, realistic about where he is, and that makes me like him a lot more. But that still leaves where he is. And where he is, he's got a lot of power and very little technique anywhere. And Mats Nilsson, he came in as kind of he went into his fight with Tor Troing in 2012 as very much a rising prospect and a guy that a lot of people were watching out for. And since then, Troing has looked increasingly bad in the UFC, so losing to him, I don't know. Troing went on a very downhill thing where he looked all right on The Ultimate Fighter and then declined pretty quickly. I think that Nilsson is probably... I think he should win this, honestly. I don't see Akhmedov as technical enough anywhere to put the fight away quickly, although he absolutely has the power to. Nilsson's got a pretty great chin, and then Nilsson's submission grappling is worlds better than Akhmedov's. And if this goes to the ground, Akhmedov has none of the tools to either stay on top or work his submission game.
All right, so
I would quickly reinforce what you were saying, Zane, in that you can tell Akhmedov, despite his credentials, is not the same tier as the standard combat and sport sambo guys that we're seeing. I think
wrestling-based guys we're seeing.
And I think what Zane was saying is, he gets lumped in with all the other excellent combat and sport sambo guys that are more proven, and they look good, but he just hasn't shown that he's on that level. I think standing-wise, and I do agree with Zane that Nielsen will definitely be better on the ground by a decent margin. I think Akhmedov should try to sprawl and brawl, and if he clinches, to do it defensively to keep Nielsen off him and just throw haymakers at his face.
Awesome. And so the odds makers, though, they like them some Omari Akhmedov. They might be falling for that Dagestani hype. They've got him favored anywhere from -162 all the way up to -211. And Mats Nilsson is the underdog, +135 all the way up to +148. So if you can't resist a dog, Mats Nilsson might be your guy. And that brings us to the Fox Sports 1 card, which starts with lightweights Evan Dunham and Rodrigo Dam fighting to stay off the scrap heap. Who is more used up at this point, Zane? Which guy has the least to give?
In a lot of ways, I feel like it's Evan Dunham, and that seems really strange. Because I know he's going to be a favorite here, and he reached a much higher point in his career than Rodrigo Dam ever did.
Rodrigo Dam fought for the Strikeforce title against Gil Melendez once.
That's true. I forgot about that. That's best forgotten about, in fact. But
it was at the Playboy Mansion.
Oh, yes. That version of the Strikeforce title.
Yeah.
But anyway, Dom just seems like, he's late in his career. He's been doing this forever, but he just kind of seems to be soldiering along with the same tools he's always had, which is a good jiu-jitsu game and no way to get it there. Doesn't wrestle, doesn't do any of that. And then a surprisingly awkward and powerful striking game that makes a lot of fights really difficult for guys. And Dunham, it just seems like he's just getting slower and less physically competitive against people, and he's been facing a higher level of competition lately to lose the fights he has, but he's losing them more and more decisively. And I feel like Dom's going to ride out an ugly decision here. I may be wrong, but to me it's very much a pick'em fight, and I'm taking Dom just because he seems more consistent lately.
Yeah, it's amazing, and we'll get to the odds in a minute, but Dunham, for a guy who's on a 3-fight losing streak, is amazingly heavily favored. So this might be the one to mortgage your mom's car on. All right, Dallas, what do you think?
What weight class is this fight at?
This fight is at lightweight.
So Dom is back up again, right?
He moved up a couple fights ago.
I agree with everything Zane said. Specifically, I think Dom has some kind of decent wrestling background, because I think I was saying kind of what Zane was saying, but someone mentioned that he had some wrestling experience, for whatever that's worth. Evan Dunham, man, I was so high on the dude when he first came in, but he has not changed up his game, I don't think, at all. And he is, I feel bad saying it because he's a real cool cat, but he is slow. Like when he's coming for, the same combination every time. He wades forward, puts his head down, and throws a 1-2 or a 1-3. You know, it's all jab straight, jab hook, looking to connect and clinch up. And I mean, he would literally do that nonstop throughout the whole fight. Like reset, either 1-2 or 1-3, and wade forward, and then stop and just keep doing the same thing over and over. I do think that he is excellent as far as kind of like a submission wrestler. So not unreal, and he's got excellent scrambles and transitions, but he's a good wrestler, good jiu-jitsu player. So I don't think he can get. On one hand, I think that he won't do that. That won't pay off well against Dom. On the other hand, maybe it's good enough where I do think he's probably the better wrestler, and I do think that he transitions from striking into his takedowns better. So I do think Dovin, that's Evan Dunham, that's a shortened form. I think he's better on the feet, even though he doesn't have a ton of power, and that he can sneak in some control and takedowns that might be kind of the difference maker. That's all I can come up with, but I do think this is pretty close to a pick'em fight, leaning slightly towards Dunham.
All right, and this one, you know I get itchy for the dogs. Not that I gamble, which I don't, but the dogs are barking because Evan Dunham is heavily favored. -425 all the way up to -803. 803, Jesus Christ, get my banker on the line. Rodrigo Dam is way underdog. +315 all the way up to +444. But -803 for a guy on a 3-fight losing streak. That is crazy pants, I gotta say. That is absolutely crazy pants. But let's move on. Heavyweight, Sean Jordan and Jared anybody know how to say this? Cannonier?
Cannonier. I mean, he's from like Texas, so I don't think it's.
So he says it Kid Nate style. All right.
Yeah.
Jared Cannonier. Like if Alex Dufresne was from Texas, it'd be Alex Dufresne. But anyway, Jared Cannonier against Sean Jordan of Louisiana, former collegiate football player. Dallas, you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, or if his full-time job was manning the cannon, he would be a cannoneer. Yeah.
Perhaps. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to leave that one.
I like how you actually tried to answer that. I don't know. In a way, so Cannonier's undefeated. He's a Gracie Barra guy out of Alaska, 7-0. So to me, it's kind of just a big question mark. I mean, he could be phenomenal. There's not a ton of footage of him out there. I think I only saw one fight, and it was not overly mostly because his opponent looked very inexperienced. But so he might come out and blow our socks off and be some kind of hidden prospect. But I would actually look at this as more of kind of a prop fight for Jordan, who's fought some big names, done okay. I think he's getting as good as an opportunity as he can hope for, being a somewhat established heavyweight. I think the athleticism, Jordan is freakishly athletic for being like bowling ball size. So, and from what I've seen, I mean, he's, everything he does, he does a little better, striking, wrestling, submission. So I like Jordan here.
All right, and Zane, your thoughts on this one?
Jordan deserves to be the favorite, but I mean, if ever there's a fighter that's been regularly failing to improve over the years, Sean Jordan seems like a guy who just is stuck in that. Is he going to break out and be a real legit heavyweight prospect mold? He's just not. He's still a strike for strike kind of live by the sword, die by the sword heavyweight who can win or lose to almost anyone. And Cannonier is fast.
Any
And
professional fighter in his weight class,
yeah, but I mean, like Matt Mitrione, to the shock of anyone, has become not that guy. He's basically going to knock you out unless you can submit him or you have monstrous power. But Sean Jordan is just kind of going in and getting knocked out by Gabriel Gonzaga in the first minute and a half.
Gonzaga's got some pop.
He does, but it's still not great for somebody, somebody on a young guy on the rise. Cannonier could easily come in and make the upset happen. It's heavyweight, and it shouldn't, Sean Jordan deserves to be the favorite. He should win, but if he's more than plus 200, then that's a little wild.
All right. So is that all you got to say about this one?
Yeah, I mean, Cannonier's really raw. He's fast, he's athletic, he's raw everywhere, but he hits hard.
And you pretty much nailed the odds. They've got Sean Jordan favored at minus 218 all the way up to minus 273, and Cannonier is the underdog at plus 180 all the way up to plus 196. And that brings us to bantamweights, Marcus Brimage and Cody Garbrandt. Another scenario where we've got an undefeated UFC debutant coming against a UFC veteran who struggled a little bit. Zane, you go first.
All right, this is a fight I'm actually really excited about, and when I wrote this up, I said that Cody Garbrandt is where Marcus Brimage is in his career now. The difference being it took Marcus Brimage 7 years, and it's taken Cody Garbrandt 2. Garbrandt is a seriously hot prospect to watch. Is he alpha male? I think he is.
He started out with strong style. And he was still listed on there as Sherdog, but then for the broadcast team, I think he's a Team Alpha Male guy now.
Yeah, I think he's gone over to Team Alpha Male. He's a guy he's been competing in boxing as a kid forever. He's got really sharp hands, and was a very standout high school wrestler as well. So he's been competing in boxing, MMA, and wrestling at an amateur level for pretty much his entire teen years. And he's just a standout athlete. Really looks like he could be a special fighter. And the thing is, Marcus Brimage is now just entering that point in his career where he's winning the fights he's supposed to win, where when he's favored, he's going out and he's getting the win. I thought he beat Russell Doan. He certainly just murked Jumbek Torshin in his last fight out. And this is going to be a really close to even fight. I mean, I'm going to go with Garbrandt. I think that he could easily be a next top 10 bantamweight, but this is a really tough fight because he's facing a fighter who's just entering the prime of his career.
All right, and Dallas, your thoughts?
There's not a lot left to say after that because I agree with everything. Garbrandt is not your usual prospect. He's young, early 20s, and he's fun to watch. I mean, kickboxing wise, he's solid. He's fast, fairly technical for only, what is he, 5 fights, 5-0? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Fast, powerful, but he's not one-dimensional at all. He's got a good tie clinch, good knees, and he throws in some takedowns here and there. Wasn't he like an all-state high school wrestler, Zane? You might have even said that.
Yes, something like that. He was a very good high school wrestler. He was recruited for UM.
Coach Mike hates that. He thinks at this level that's not even worth mentioning. But I actually disagree because that shows. I mean, if you achieve the all-state level at even if it's high school, it doesn't mean you're a superstar, but it means you know your way around the wrestling mat. And for him to transition and polish his, I didn't know you said he boxed at a younger career. So he
had a 32-1 amateur boxing career.
Ooh, damn! All right, I didn't know that. This is going to be a really good fight. I was super high on Brimage at first, but he kind of fizzled a little bit, and that could be I might have overestimated his potential, but I would call this even or a pick'em, and I was kind of leaning Garbrandt too, but it's so tough because he came up and he's never fought anyone close to this level. Like I said with the Gracie Barra guy, Cannonier, he could prove right off the bat he's destined for the top 10, or it could be that he's been beaten up on lesser experienced guys. But there's no question that this kid has a real high upside. I guess maybe I'll, I don't know. I don't really. This is total coin flip. I'd kind of like to see Garbrandt win, but I do think that Brimage is pretty solid. I guess I'll begrudgingly pick Brimage, but I wouldn't be surprised, and I'd be kind of happy to see Garbrandt come out and put on a show.
All right, and the odds makers agree. They've got Brimage favored, but not by an enormous margin. They've got a minus 190 all the way up to minus 242. Actually, minus 185 is the lowest. And then Garbrandt is the underdog, plus 160 all the way up to plus 174. And that brings us to Danny Castillo and Paul Felder, another lightweight bout, headlining the Fox Sports 1 card, which is not that big a deal. I mean, this is a pretty weak Fox Sports 1 card, I have to say, for such a hot pay-per-view. But it is what it is. Zane, Dallas, you talk about this one first.
Well, these will be exciting fights, though. I mean, regardless of the status or whatever, these should all turn out to be pretty action-packed fights, I would guess. This is probably about as style versus style as it gets nowadays. Castillo, wrestler, obviously. Felder he's I think he knocked someone out with a spinning heel kick, so he's kind of got that. He's a Taekwondo black belt. Hold on, I wrote this one down. He's a BJJ blue belt, and I know like gi rank or belt color doesn't mean that much, but if you're a BJJ blue belt in the UFC, that usually is indicative that you have a lot of work to do on your ground game. Especially, and not that that's huge, but against Castillo, I mean, this guy's not going to be able to out-wrestle Castillo, so there's a really good chance that he's going to be on his back. So that's when it'll become a big deal. He's going to have to at least be proficient enough to keep him off, defensively scramble, try to cage walk when he can. So I'm going to go Castillo. Felder will be fun to watch. He's 9-0, so he's not like a flash in the pan, but this is a really tough matchup for him. I think it's going to almost be whittled down to a puncher's chance, where he's going to have to make something happen as Castillo's coming in or before he gets taken down, because I think once he's there, and Castillo's the kind of dude who he gives no fucks. He will take you down and keep you there for all 3 rounds. So Castillo.
All right, Zane, your pick.
Yeah, I mean, this is much more a fight that Castillo's going to win. I think the big surprise for Felder last time out was just how athletic he is and how strong he is. He was way more powerful than Jason Sago, who was a much more technical fighter than Felder, but just got totally overwhelmed. And Castillo, we're once again looking at a much more technical fighter, but we're looking at somebody that Felder can't overpower and is not going to be way more athletic than. And at that point, I mean, Felder still almost lost split decision to Sago, and I don't see any reason that he won't lose a pretty easy decision to Castillo here.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty good tune-up shot for Castillo. So the odds makers have Castillo favored minus 212 all the way up to minus 284, and Paul Felder is the dog at plus 175 all the way up to plus 210. And that brings us to the pay-per-view opening fight: Hector Lombard and Josh Berkman at welterweight. Berkman, the former World Series of Fighting welterweight champion, coming into the UFC against the former Bellator middleweight champion Hector Lombard. This one has this is a classic UFC pay-per-view starter, if you ask me, and it doesn't look good for Berkman. Zane, you talk.
Yeah, this is one of those things where the only thing that I'm really hung up on is just how inconsistent Hector Lombard can be in terms of the performance he actually puts out. Like, he doesn't tend to lose many close fights, but he will put on some ugly, uninspired bouts against top competition. I mean, his fights with Tim Boetsch and Yushin Okami and Jake Shields. Jake Shields one was dominant, but it was still, I don't know. He's just not, like, he can be a powerhouse or he can just be a cage blanket. And that's my only concern here. But honestly, I got to give this to Lombard. Even if it's a decision, I got to give it to Lombard. The level of competition that Berkman has been beating and been really competitive against have either been guys who are well past their best point in their career, or who are were never that competitive at a UFC level, whereas Lombard is still very competitive at the highest level in the UFC. So I got to give Lombard this fight, and I think it's a good matchup for him, and everything's just tilted for him.
All right, in Dallas?
I think you said it all when you said it's not looking good for Berkman. This is just a terrible matchup for him. I like Josh. I'm glad that he's back in. He's scrappy. He's fun to watch, and he always has some surprises. But it's a terrible matchup for him because usually either from a striking or wrestling standpoint, in one of those areas he has an advantage or a somewhat positive path forward, and he has neither here. Lombard is better in the clinch. He's a better grappler. He's a better submission grappler. He's a better striker. He's got more power. It's pretty rare that I say, which probably means it'll be an upset, but this should be a curb stomping for Lombard.
Yeah, and the odds makers agree. They've got him heavily favored at minus 685 is the best odds you can get, and minus 1,089 is the high end for Lombard. And then Josh Berkman is the underdog at plus 475 all the way up to plus 587. A little bit of a dichotomy there. You usually don't see. You'd think that some of the odds on Berkman would be a little longer considering how completely, minus 1,089, that is insane, heavy-duty odds. But the next fight is flyweights Kyoji Horiguchi against Luis Gaudino. This is a big test for Horiguchi. Can he live up to the hype against what is a very tough test and a proven contender in the UFC? Not quite contender, but a proven gatekeeper at the very least in the UFC flyweight division. Dallas, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think this is a really tough match for Gaudino. He's so, even for a flyweight, man, he is small. What is he, like 5'2" or 5'3"?
5'3".
And not a lot of like really scary, potent weapons. Like there's not an area where you're like, but watch out for God knows blank. I don't want to, oversell Horiguchi either, because this is a sensible fight, but it's one that, man, I just gotta. I don't know. Gaudino would have to out-wrestle and out-scramble him, and that's possible. But I think standing Horiguchi's gonna be better. And man, I don't even know if Gaudino can out-wrestle and out-grapple him. Plus that he's gonna be facing a bit of a size deficit, and it seems like Horiguchi might even be quicker. So I don't want to undersell Gaudino here, but I'm thinking all Horiguchi.
All right, and Zane, your thoughts?
Yeah, I got to go with Horiguchi as well. Gaudino, his biggest assets are his endurance and his output. He's the kind of guy that will get in your face and throw 150 strikes, over a round or two and just, stay on you all the time. He's really high output. And that could be tough to handle for Horiguchi. He doesn't quite have the Japanese bug of, throwing 5 strikes around, but he's not super, super high output either. He likes to set his own pace and work at it, so I could see Gaudino kind of throwing him off that way. But Horiguchi's just the better athlete, the better striker, and his biggest troubles so far have come to guys who can really pressure him with wrestling and grappling and make the fight tough for him there, and I don't see Gaudino doing that. So,
all right, and the odds makers like them some Horiguchi as well. These are some pretty heavy odds. They've got him favored from minus 650 at the low end, all the way up to minus 1,059. So that is not a lot of money returned if you bet on Horiguchi there. And Luis Gaudino is the underdog at plus 450 all the way up to plus 587. And that brings us to Brad Tavares versus Nate Marquardt. And this fight is at middleweight. So Marquardt going back to middleweight. Zane, you can go first on this one.
This should be Brad Tavares' fight to win. He's been looking great when he's not fighting Yoel Romero or getting a knee popped through his face by Tim Boetsch. He's been looking really on point and really technically sound, and looks like all the wheels are really clicking into place for him right now, Tavares. And Marquardt is kind of at this second lease on life stage where he's clawed himself back into relevancy with a big win over James Tahuna, who's actually surprisingly almost as far into the game as Marquardt is. He's been fighting for a lot longer than most people think. So for Tavares, he's getting a guy who's really only been competitive recently against somebody else past their prime, and this should be a fight for him to really show off and show that he's still at his best right now, and that's provided that he doesn't get caught with something big like he did against Boch. But Marquardt doesn't usually have that kind of sudden one-shot kill power. He's shown it a couple times, but it's not really something he's known for.
Yeah, except against Demian Maia. But usually it's those freaky combos that Marquardt unleashes on you if you let him unload. And Dallas, your thoughts on this one?
I would like to see Nate do more of that, because when he first came in, it was a big snoozer. I think that was the first live fight night on Spike TV, and he fought Ivan Salaverry, and it was all way too methodical. So I like it that Nate, when he really turns it up and takes some chances, because he's the kind of dude who's got a really nice offensive arsenal. I mean, like the whole medley of strikes finishing with the elbows against Woodley is a perfect example. And people forget Nate is a pimp on the ground. I mean, like old school pancrase. I mean, he's amazing on the ground. We just don't always get to see it. I was leaning Tavares here, who's a guy that's still, he's super legit. I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. I think Marquardt's going to be quicker. Tavares will be stronger and slower, but will have more power. This is one where Nate should draw upon all his old, crafty, veteran, old wise man shit. He's got a ton of experience, and I think he should pick his spots, not go balls out and be reckless, but pick his spots to really squeeze the trigger and unload serious offense. If he just tries to stand and almost like spar or point fight with Tavares, he's got a good chin, and he's tough to move around. So I'd like to see Nate go ultra aggressive on the feet, and I do think that if Nate gets him down on the ground, unless Tavares can stand right back up, if Nate can stay hooked to him, there's going to be a pretty sizable skill deficit there. So, this is another one, man. I wish I was, I guess, more not so non-committal, but I don't know. I guess I was leaning Tavares here. I'll probably still go Tavares, but I'd like to see Nate shake it up a little bit.
Yeah, the odds makers don't quite know what to make of this matchup either. They've got Tavares as the slight underdog at plus 105 all the way up to plus 120. Marquardt favored but not heavily, minus 130 all the way up to minus 158. So, and I think this fight's a little bit of a turd in the punch bowl in this pay-per-view. I wish they had some up-and-comers. I guess they're hoping Tavares turns it on, and this is a huge opportunity for him if he can seize it. And that brings us to the co-main event, Donald Cerrone against the undefeated Miles Jury. Cerrone's got a heck of a win streak of his own here. The stakes are high. This has a number one contenders match written all over it. Anthony Pettis should be watching this fight very closely. But Eugene and I on the Care Don't Care preview were all about Miles Jury and the unblemished psyche of the undefeated record versus Cowboy Cerrone, who probably doesn't have the world's highest fight IQ and has been streaky in the past. So we both picked Jury, but I'm curious to see what our more informed and thoughtful panelists think. Zane, you go first.
All right. Well, Jury's only technically undefeated. He has lost a split decision on The Ultimate Fighter to Ali Quinta.
Yeah. But that was not a professional sanctioned fight.
No, but if you're talking psyche, that would,
Yeah, it's different when you're fighting in front of an audience, though.
Oh, I guess, maybe.
And you look at that Wikipedia record, and it's unblemished. I think that Miles Jury
I'm
probably...
just saying that if you're talking about the psyche of an unblemished fighter, there's a blemish.
That's true. There's a blemish. All right.
But anyway...
Enough with the facts and the reality.
Yeah, I know. That's not what we're here for. Anyway, I am definitely feeling Miles Jury getting a win here. And it's just, Cerrone is what he is, and what he is very good, but it follows a set pattern of beatability, and it's not like, and if you can't hit that pattern, if you can't beat him the way that you need to beat him, he's almost impossible to beat. Like Eddie Alvarez didn't have a kicking game and didn't have the ability to work a range game.
And didn't work the body.
and yeah, and match Cerrone there, and Cerrone he couldn't beat Cerrone. He couldn't, even being a sharper boxer, there was no path to victory for him.
There was a point where Cerrone's head looked like a fast bag, and Alvarez was lighting it up like you would work a fast bag, and didn't seem to phase Cerrone. It was uncanny and had to be terrifying for Alvarez.
Yeah, and so if you're in that mold, like Eddie Alvarez, like Jim Miller, even like Adriano Martins, like Cerrone is really, really hard to beat. But if you can move at range, if you can throw a variety of strikes, if you can mix up your attacks at all levels, if you can do the kind of things that I think Miles Jury is pretty capable of doing, and doing in a very dynamic and unpredictable way, I think it'd be an upset for Jury to win this, but I think the path is there for him, and I'm picking Jury to win it.
And Dallas, your thoughts?
So, well, Miles Jury is a Michigan guy, and actually it's kind of interesting because the other one is Tony Ferguson, which is actually a killer matchup at lightweight between those two. Going back, I don't think Cerrone has a great fight IQ either, but that's why everyone loves him. It's like Carlos Condit. Like, he has no fight IQ, but he just goes out.
I think Condit has a very good fight IQ.
Take away the Diaz fight, and I think that's the only one he showed some semblance of
strategy. He's got a balls out style, but anyway, I think he's got a good. Anyway, I think we can get into the Cerrone versus Condit thing later.
Yeah, well, and those two are both like the most exciting combination of two skills is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai, and that's Condit and.
Let me make a coherent point. I think the difference is that Condit is very aware of what he needs to do to win at all times, even if he takes a high risk approach to getting there. And I think Cerrone sometimes lapses into the fighting for fight's sake, and isn't thinking about the win. Is just thinking about trading and exchanging, and just has blood in his mouth and wants more of it. He's just a crazy man. Anyway, go ahead.
That blood in the mouth part was vivid.
It was vivid. I'm known for my vivid wordsmithery. Anyway, go ahead.
I do think Jury's a bad matchup for him. Not a bad. I mean, so this is a really even fight. Not to take it, but Jury is tough. So when this kid came up around, he was fighting King of the Cage as a real young dude. I mean, geez, I don't know how old he was, 16, 17, 18, and he looked like he was 14 or 15. I mean, skinny, tall, but this skinny dude was wrecking motherfuckers. I mean, like first round, flying, I mean, insane finishing power. And that's kind of, I always mention that because now he's evolved and matured a lot. He fights really smart now. He fights, more like a veteran than like a prospect who's still trying to figure things out. To me, the standing interplay is going to be interesting because Jury is, I give him the definite edge in wrestling. He can throw kicks, but Cerrone's obviously much more dynamic and much more kick-centric. And normally I wouldn't say this, but I do think that Jury will be waiting for that, and he's quick enough and long enough where he will spring for a takedown if Cerrone starts to telegraph his kicks or if he just starts to stay outside. So even though Cerrone's probably got a little bit of a better range game, I actually think Jury might be a little longer than him. I think he's an inch taller, but I think he might have a better reach. But just the fact that that's close and Jury's, I think, a solid wrestler, he's going to have the edge in that. I'd also give Cerrone the edge in submission grappling, but I don't think that's going to be a big factor unless it's like circumstantial. Like anyone can get caught on the feet with a punch. If Jury's not careful, Cerrone could lace on, a triangle in a transition or whatever. But I do think that's close enough where Jury will likely end up on top, and that his anti-jiu-jitsu will kind of shut that down. But I mean, with this kind of fight with guys like Cerrone and Jury, I mean, a split-second punch or being too late to move your head could decide this. But on paper, I kind of like Miles Jury for this one, and I think it's going to be his combination of striking and being able to change levels. Even if he can't take Cerrone down repeatedly, the fact that Cerrone is going to have to deal with that is going to throw off his striking a little bit.
All right, and the odds makers, let me get back here. I was doing some research for the Jones-Cormier matchup. The odds makers, they like them some Cerrone, so it might be an opportunity for those of us who are listening to believe the kids on the MMA Vivisection panel, because Cerrone's favored from -185 all the way up to -245. Miles Jury, the underdog, at +150 all the way up to plus 172. So, yeah, I'd feel really comfortable with the jury bet again if I bet, which I don't. And so, Daniel Cormier and John Jones, now the main event. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what it's all about. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read Conor Rubish's excellent series on Bloody Elbow about the ways that, let's see, he's got a sexy title for it. Let me get that.
Gaps in the armor.
Gaps in the armor, yes, and about how Cormier can beat John Jones. And he says it comes down to three things, one of which the readers kind of rebelled on Conor. I don't think they quite understood his point, which was exchange kicks. Basically, don't concede the kicking game to Jones. Number two, lots of lateral movement to get on the inside. Number three, pressure, and attack in sequence and combinations. And he paints a compelling game plan, and the question is, can Cormier and his team at American Kickboxing Academy, I think they're seeing these same opportunities. They watch the Gustafsson fight closely. They've seen that Jones is vulnerable. Cormier, if you're a coach, man, Cormier is a very handy implement. This is a smart guy. This is a skilled guy. This is a hardworking guy who takes coaching well. A veteran, experienced, top-level athlete. But can he beat John Jones? I think the edge for Jones is in the dirtiness, the eye pokes, the throat chokes, the stomps, the headbutts that he sneaks in.
The throat chokes.
The throat. I mean, he attacks the throat. I don't know what you call them. Throat chokes.
Trachealock, tracheoplata.
The karate chop to the neck. How about that? Like what he did to Shogun, which was just unseemly and vicious. And I think that is, and also Cormier with his, he flushed out of the Olympics in Peking with a failure to make weight. He lost in the World Championship round to one of the best wrestlers of his era. He lost repeatedly in college to the great Cal Sanderson. So I think there's a little bit of second place sewn in Cormier's psyche, and John Jones is a champion all the way. So I'm picking John Jones, but my analytical brain sees a very clear path to victory for Daniel Cormier that I don't quite see for Jones. So I'm going with the psyche. Who wants to go first on this one?
Oh, I will.
All right, all yours.
It's the toughest thing for me about picking this fight and looking at it is that we are picking Daniel Cormier almost entirely based on the potential for him to beat great, athletic, skilled fighters in their prime. Because what we see on his record is not that, really. I mean, his best wins are Josh Barnett and Antonio Silva, and those are both great heavyweights, but they both have, they're not complete fighters. Josh Barnett is not like the prime specimen of athletic ability, and Antonio Silva is surprisingly good, but also surprisingly bad at times. I mean, he's a guy that just came out and lost Andrei Arlovsky like it was nothing.
So you're saying destroying a no TRT aging Dan Henderson isn't quite as impressive as it?
That Dan Henderson fight was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life, and it has no business being.
Forget the Frank Yeager BJ Penn fight number 3.
Yes, very similar to that. And beyond that, we've got Patrick Cummings, who we know the story behind that, and Roy Nelson, which it's a good fight, it's a good win, but it's not like a top contender win. And Frank Mir, who is always hanging around the top of heavyweight division because heavyweight's weird, but has not been competitive lately, really. And Dion Starring, that's the past couple of years for Daniel Cormier, are some good wins and some fun fights, but not the kind of level of even remotely reflecting the level of competition that Jones has faced. And so when he goes into this fight, we're really looking at Daniel Cormier's first fight against a championship caliber fighter in their prime. And that means something. I mean, that makes it very hard to predict exactly how he's going to match up, exactly how effective.
What about is that not balanced by the fact that Cormier has been fighting against heavyweights?
Not really. Not appreciably, I don't think. I mean, there's some balance there, but it's not to the point that I would be like, oh, so we now know that Cormier's technical abilities and skills are going to translate perfectly to fighting a championship level fight. I mean, if he'd beat Junior Dos Santos or even Stipe Miocic or somebody like that, it might be a bit easier to see exactly how his skills are going to match up against somebody who's technically good everywhere and athletically competitive. But it's a bit of a crapshoot here. I mean, we're really banking on what we've seen of Daniel Cormier's wrestling translating perfectly to beating John Jones. And if it doesn't, then Jones is a much... Like, the gaps for beating Jones just aren't really there or as big, you know? You don't say about Jones, oh, his stand-up is sloppy or it, you know, lacks elegance or is not powerful.
You can say that his jab isn't quite what you'd expect for a guy as tall and range as he
Daniel
is.
Cormier is an overhand right and some sneaky play. Like, Daniel Cormier's stand-up is sneaky, which means not technical but effective. Like, he's not... You know, without his wrestling, the threats of his stand-up are diminished. With his wrestling, the threat of his stand-up is really high. It's really powerful. And
So
really
do you think that the deciding factor is whether or not Cormier can get Jones down or who can get the takedown? Is that what it's going to come down to?
I think I think this fight will come down to the clinch, and it'll be, can Daniel Cormier control the clinch? And if he can, then he can win this fight. But Jones has looked incredibly good there. I mean,
I would like to have Coach Mike Ridden in our pocket right now to tell us how Cormier did against elite level wrestlers who were tall and skinny in his amateur wrestling days, because it's such an asymmetrical battle between a guy like Jones who's so tall and so lanky that he's great with the leg trips and the lateral drops and hip tosses against somebody like Cormier who's got a much lower center of gravity and is just, as you saw when he tossed Josh Barnett around, is just deadly if he gets a double waist lock on you. I mean, you know, if he gets his arms locked around your waist, you're probably going for a ride, and that to me is very intriguing and exciting and fun to think about.
Yeah, it's a huge question, and I mean, technically, right now, just for the complexity of offense beyond just wrestling, but striking as well, I can't bet against John Jones. He's, you know, he hasn't done anything to remove that, you know, that allowance in my mind. It's like the Anderson Silva thing, where at some point, even going to the Chris Weidman fight and being like, okay, Chris could beat him. I can't pick against Anderson Silva. Like, you can't do it. And John Jones is at that same point where it's just like, I can't pick against him. And I think that the battles... Honestly, I think that he may be a better, stronger, and more complete clinch fighter, and I think that's where this fight comes down to.
All right, and Dallas, your thoughts on this?
I agree that it'll come down to the clinch. You know, ever since this, it took me a long time to warm up to Cormier because everyone was freaking out, you know, by the time he fought Jeff Monson. But I've, you know, slowly come around, and I think, you know, for what Zane said, it's just he can't match Jones's level of competition. But I do think we can draw from how badly he dominated a lot of those guys. I actually think that Cormier's size presents just as much of a challenge to Jones as Jones usually does, you know, to Cormier and with all his other opponents. Because if you think about it, Jones' length has been, you know, his length just it transmits as pure leverage, and he's really good at using that. But if I were John Jones, I would have been training for this fight, like doing everything literally like 4 to 5 inches lower than he usually does. So the way I see this playing out is, how does anyone stop Daniel Cormier from coming in and just getting his hands on you? I mean, it's either footwork or... And I don't mean like getting taken down. I mean just for him to come up and lock up a clinch. It can be an open space, or he can drive Jones against the fence. To me, that is the hardest thing. That's going to be really tough for Jones because Cormier is low center of gravity. He's fast as hell. He moves his head around, and he has excellent entries, and he's quick, good footwork. So to me, if I'm, you know, in John Jones' camp, the first thing I want to do is figure out, how do we keep this dude off us? You know, how do we maintain that space? The thing that's tough with Jones is, you know, when Zane was saying it's not that he you know, he does everything technical, but everything he does is unorthodox. Like I always bring up, he does so much weird shit on the feet, and I remember the Gustafsson fight was the first time he got his bell rung, and all of a sudden now he needed to do work and get back in the fight. And how did he do it? He did it with left elbows and left high kicks. Like, who the fuck does that? You know, usually that's when you get a solid stance, you start putting together combinations and working in kicks, but Jones like goes totally, you know, off the map. And of course it worked. To me, that's what makes this matchup phenomenal, is that to beat Cormier, you know, it's kind of like wrestler grappler. If one guy, and I'm not saying Cormier is going to easily take him down, I do think he's going to be able to get in his face and tie up with him. So how do you stop that? Usually, you know, flying knee, you know, you have to do something really, really creative. Of course, there's always just the good old hold your ground, get underhooks, don't get taken down. But you know, you can't win a championship fight by doing that. So what I'm really interested in is how Jones defends Cormier's entries into the clinch. And what makes Cormier so deadly is he can also change levels. Even though he hardly ever does it, he usually looks to get into the clinch, get his hands on people, work for a body lock, and throw a lot of distraction punches. And I think that's going to serve him really, really well in this fight, as long as he doesn't do only that. I would like to see him change levels. I'd also like to see him, after he, you know, plays back and forth between those two, fake low and then just come up high with some crazy punches. His striking isn't polished, but I think he's done phenomenal. Like he had that baby Fedor thing going for a while, where he's got like those almost like corkscrew style punches. I'm not saying that's great, because Jones in his length, if he starts to straighten some of his punches out, like how often have we seen Jones like throw a standard technical, you know, like 1-2-3? Like he does that a little bit, but most of his stuff is really unusual and unorthodox, and he's the master at that. So I guess to get to my point, that's what makes this so fascinating, is I see Cormier being able to close the gap and get his hands on Jones. Jones will have to do something out of the box creative, and that's what he's a master of. So in one way, that's what makes it appealing, but it's hard to predict how this goes down. The other like weird little interplay I'm interested in is when Cormier's coming in, Jones normally, because he has the leverage and the balance, he'll normally immediately look to go for like a tie plum or a high double collar tie, which is good because it's offensive, because then you can keep the guy back. But elbows, you know, you're in perfect position to thwack an elbow, knees, of course, and you can actually get a lot of control, you know, from holding that tie plum or double collar tie. That's going to be dangerous as hell against Cormier, because number one, he's, you know, whatever, 6-8 inches shorter than the regular cat. He's got a boat anchor as far as his center of gravity, and if he goes high, it's going to leave him exposed for Cormier to drop levels and attack his hips. Now, of course, Jones's proportions work the same way, in that Cormier is going to have to penetrate on his takedowns another 5 to 6 inches deeper than he normally would. But the difference to me is the fence. So if Cormier gets him up against the fence, that 5 to 6 inches of penetration is going to be, you know, no more than that. And if anything, he can lessen that a little bit. So I know I rambled for a while on this, but to me, this is that kind of fight. It's like you have to, there's so many unknowns, and part of that's from what Zane was saying. We haven't really seen how Cormier will fight a guy of this caliber, and on top of that, Jones is a freak anomaly in all of MMA. So I don't know what to expect from Jones either. I do think that he'll throw a lot of close range elbows for sure. Knees will be a little risky. But to me, the onus is on John Jones to pull out some shit, because Cormier, it's going to be easier for him to use angles, not leave himself exposed, and use his footwork and speed to get inside and hang on John Jones. So I'm going to probably pick Cormier because of that, but I think it's going to be tough for Jones. He's a master of coming up with amazingly nasty offensive tools that no one saw coming, and he's going to have to do that. He can. You know, that's why everyone loves him. That's why he's the champ, but it's tough to bet on, I think. So I actually might go Cormier here.
Very interesting pick, and there's one aspect that neither of you guys talked about. I want you to think through and explain to the listeners. What about the guard game? If one guy establishes that he's the better wrestler and can get on top, is it over? If Daniel Cormier can get on top of John Jones, does Jones, I mean, we haven't seen much of his guard, but he's long and lanky. what happens if Cormier's on top, and what happens if Jones is on top? Is in which case, I think if Jones is on top, it's over for Cormier. He's short, stumpy. He's not a guard player. That we have no indication that he's a guard player, and Jones is just so vicious on top. Cormier on top, especially in Jones's guard. Jones is long and lanky. We don't know how good his guard game is, but he's long and lanky. He's going to have lots of leverage. It's going to be hard for Cormier to get high up and strike down with the short arms. I think that is one more advantage John Jones has. Zane, what do you think about that point?
I don't agree with it at all.
Well, elaborate.
Okay, Jones has never shown any predilection for jiu-jitsu outside of the purely functional what fits into his game, and a guard game doesn't fit anywhere into what Jones does. I mean, it's the kind of he's more likely to do like the arm cranks from, when he was in close.
Standing arm crank on Glover Teixeira.
The standing arm crank, the standing guillotine on Lyoto Machida, things like that fit perfectly into how he attacks when he's in close. But, no part of his game is geared towards I'm going to be on my back. And when he is on his back, when he's down, when he gets taken down briefly, which we've seen, I think, in the Gustafsson fight, Gustafsson maybe, came close, I think, on a couple takedowns, if not took him down once. It just explodes straight back to your feet really quickly, and he does so very technically and very well, and he does it, really consistently, and I would pick and think Cormier would be capable of doing the same as well. Neither man seems like they're the kind of guy who's built to, trained to, or likely to spend a lot of time on their back, no matter how good their competition is. They're both athletic enough, they're both skilled enough to find ways to get up quickly and create space. So,
what about this? Do you see Jones turtling if Cormier is consistently getting the
not
takedowns?
For more than a couple of seconds. Like, I think that these are two of the few men capable of playing the game the way that lighter weight fighters play it, the way that lightweights, welterweights, featherweights play it. Where now, if you're looking at a lot of the modern game in those weight divisions, you don't, against really good fighters, rarely spend a lot of time in one static position on the ground. They get taken down, they immediately roll back up to their feet. Fighters who are looking for takedowns are looking for them more as a way to change how their opponent defends or change how their opponent looks for strikes, rather than saying, I'm going to take you down and I'm going to lay on you and I'm really going to try and work you over on the ground. It's like, I'm going to take you down and I'm going to punch you really hard while you're trying to get up. That's more what we're seeing, and I think that Jones and Cormier are more likely to play that game than they are likely to try and just take one of them down and work a top game.
All right, and Dallas, your thoughts on the potential guard game in this fight?
Actually, I'm not sure why. I was thinking as Zane was saying that, but I'm inclined to believe that Jones is significantly more polished in the submission grappling, I should say. Didn't he pull guard or throw up like a flying armbar on someone right towards the end of the round?
Yeah, he did on Shogun. He threw up a submission, I believe, but he also almost got tapped by Vitor Belfort.
He got his arm seriously hurt by Vitor Belfort. And the Shogun fight, that was the kind of thing where he was just showing, I can do anything to this guy.
Yeah.
And I want to say there was another fight, maybe Ver, someone where he hit. I'm not going to be able to put anything tangible on it, but I want to say there's times when I thought, ooh, we don't see it a lot, but I bet John Jones has a pretty slick grappling game. But again, pure speculation because we haven't seen it.
He was so busy destroying Brandon Vera's orbital bone with his elbow that he didn't really get to show off.
So I think that, again, proportion-wise, a guy like Daniel Cormier, with his kind of like explosive ability and the way that his body is made, it's so hard for a long, lanky guy to hold a guy like that down. Because, normally you picture like, a guy like me, like you have a long ways to go to like roll onto a hip, but Cormier is so, like, everything's so tight. And I think the one way Jones would be able to hold him or to keep him down is to literally like flatten himself out and totally make it obvious, like I am trying to hold this dude down. Otherwise, Jones is his ground and pound is devastating. I think his ground and pound is probably the best in the sport right now. I don't know if people mention that, but I mean, he will slaughter your ass with elbows. I mean, he's brutal. But to me, like I have like a catch for everything. So if Jones postures up to throw an elbow, Cormier is so compact, he'll roll onto a hip and buck him off. Even though I think Jones is a little more fluid and more technical on his back, Cormier is the type that will keep him down. Like, he will widen out his base and make sure he does not lose position before he postures up to try to throw strikes. Not as exciting, not as dynamic, but just as effective if you think about it. So I guess to answer your question, I don't even remember what it was, but I do think Jones is more well-versed, more technical off his back and in purely submission grappling. But I think it's a wash because of Cormier's wrestling and his athleticism and his smarts. You know, he will not do anything stupid to appease the crowd. So he will go for kind of a safety-first strategy, which is what he should do against Jones.
All right, and so the odds makers, they like John Jones, but not by much. This is some of the tightest odds we've ever seen on a John Jones. Definitely during his championship run, these are the closest odds we've seen. He's favored from -158 all the way up to -190. And Daniel Cormier is the underdog, but not by much. +127 all the way up to +155. So if your palms get sweaty at the thought of gambling on guys face punching, this is going to be a nail biter. I mean, this fight, it's a historic fight. It's a huge fight in business. These are two athletes at the peak of their abilities, two thoroughbreds, perfect, gifted, great athletes, champions. And I'm so excited. I cannot wait for this fight. So, Zane, are you going to be there for the 6th round with me?
I believe I will. Yes, I will be there for the 6th round.
All I heard was yes. Excellent. Yes. So no questions doubt. And Dallas, thank you very much, guys. Remember, give us a like on YouTube. That's the thumb below the screen. Subscribe to MMANation.com. And also, you're going to want to start subscribing to the second secret MMANation.com because there are going to be some changes in how we do things in 2015. A lot of the longer, more free-form, hardcore content is going to be moving to our secret YouTube channel, and we're going to be doing more short, concise, sort of casual fan version.
How do they find it if it's secret? It's like the singing bush.
We'll have to figure out. We're going to put links in the videos so you can subscribe. We'll put a link in this one just so you can subscribe to both channels. That's how we'll do it, Dallas. We will provide a light in the darkness for people. But at the moment, I don't know exactly how you would do it because the thing with YouTube is...
Just stop right there. You were doing so good before that.
Yeah, anyway, so... almost had people convinced it was a professional show. I am wearing sweatpants and not jammy pants after all. So follow us on Twitter. Dallas is at Uncle Justice. Zane is at Simon. Follow me on Twitter if you want to, at KidNate. Read us on BloodyElbow.com. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks, guys. Adios, MMA aficionados. We'll see you at the fights.